Ilizwi Moja Africa family. So, welcome to episode 13 of our podcast. So, we're starting our series on trailblazing youth doing amazing things in Africa. So, with that being said, we have an interesting discussion on elections and have invited a few inspiring and thought provoking young people to join us. So, let's talk about African elections. Do you guys know that we have over 25 elections in 2024 that either happened or still needs to happen in Africa? Crazy, right? So our lovely guest will provide their thoughts on political elections in Africa and their implications on young people. But before we jump into it, we would appreciate it if you follow us on Twitter at Ilizwi Moja or on Facebook at Ilizwi Moja and check out our TikTok at Ilizwi Moja Africa. Also, don't forget to like our videos and subscribe to our YouTube channel. So I'm your host for today, Lindy Lumtembu, an academic enthusiast, joined by my co-host, Harry Ruyanga, a youth mentor, author, and leadership coach at Shuja Rising Consulting from Kenya. So we are excited to see the growth of our IMA team as we welcome Katliso Myataza. Katliso is a passionate advocate, researcher, and content creator from South Africa, and is currently pursuing a double major in psychology and Black Liberation Politics at Wellesley College with cross-registration at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT. So her philosophy centers on building a multidisciplinary understanding of libertarian progress, emphasizing collaboration, knowledge, and community engagements. So Katliso will be our social media volunteer for the next 6 months, and we are super excited to learn from her expertise.
In addition to our Ilizwi Moja team, we have our lovely guests joining us. These individuals are true trailblazers and change makers in their communities who have an interest in advancing African lives. We will start with JD Orengo, who is a social justice advocate with 10 years experience as a human rights defender and a community organizer. He also has served as a youth organizer for more than 10 years under the Orange Democratic Movement, which is a prominent political party in Kenya. Our next guest is Ndeye Aida, who is a journalist all the way from Senegal. And she is also the Secretary General of the Association of Gender Sensitive Journalists. She is currently working as a media and communication specialist at the IFAN, Sheikh Anta Diop University Research Center. So we are so privileged to have you all join us in this discussion.
Awesome. So let's get into some current news. So just over 3 weeks ago, Bassirou Diomaye Faye was a little-known opposition leader languishing in jail, detained without trial on charges including inciting insurrection, who had never held elected office. And then a few weeks ago, he defeated the governing party's candidate Amadou Ba in the country's presidential election, winning 54% in the first round. And on Tuesday, April 2nd, the 44-year-old was sworn in as the 5th president of Senegal, becoming Africa's youngest elected head of state. In a region where a large majority of the population are under 30, his victory offers hope to those young people frustrated by a lack of economic opportunities, with old elites seemingly clinging to power. So Bassirou truly defied all odds. I saw a headline that read "From Prisoner to President." So this young president has stirred a lot of conversations in concern with the future of African elections. So bearing this in mind, this leads me to my first question. So this is just to the floor. Do you believe that young people play an active role in influencing the outcome of elections in Africa?
Hey, Silly.
Yes, Ida.
Yeah, I would like to thank you for inviting me and giving me the opportunities to share my thoughts about this election and about the youth participation. So your question related to that, if it is related to youth and election, is very interesting. And I mean that to respond it, we have to talk about, where Bassirou Diomaye Faye come from. Bassirou Diomaye Faye, 44 years old. he's the one that have been chosen by President Ousmane Sonko. President Ousmane Sonko is a great leader who has been really followed by young people. And all of this started when, and I want to talk to just discuss a little bit about their story. President Diomaye Faye and Ousmane Sonko was two leaders, and they were working in the tax and customer department in Senegal, and they were dissatisfied by the corruption and the political favoritism that we used to see in Senegal. So they decided to create their own political party. And then over the past year, Ousmane Sonko have been fired from his work because he was talking about, corruption and many things that was happening in the Senegalese administration. And he decided to run and to be, to run for the parliament. And he has been parliament member in 2029. And after that, he became, candidate of the presidential in 2029, but he didn't win. And so just after the election, the president election of 2029, he has been accused of rape, of sexual assaults by a young girl. Young people mobilize themselves because they are seeing that it was just a way to prevent him from becoming the next president of Senegal. And Senegal have really passed over, many an intense, political situation, and over 60 young people have been died during this political episode of Senegal. So Ousmane Sonko, because he has been accused of rape and after of giving information was not true, he was not able to run to be candidate for the election of 2024. But because young people really love him, they decided to elect the one that have been chosen, the one who has been chosen by President Sonko, and it was Bassirou Diomaye Faye. So I can see that, the election of Bassirou Diomaye Faye is really what they call a revolution of young people, because they have been murdered during the political problem in Senegal. They have been murdered. But after that, when they decided to recognize that Bassirou Diomaye Faye would become, the candidate of the party Patriot, young people have been engaged to convince, for example, people to vote for Bassirou Diomaye Faye, and started by their own home, where they convince young veterans and convince their mothers and fathers that it was really time for young people it was really time to give the responsibility for young people. And I think that it's very important. And many people say that what's happened in Senegal is like a revolution of young people who say that, who say that elders have tested from so many times. Now it's time for young people to run. And I think that it can be, a good opportunities we can talk it later, to have similar movement elsewhere else in Africa, to form similar parties, or to have similar projection to make young people arrive in the powers.
Wow, thank you so much, Ida. Thank you for that context of how young people had mobilized to actually have Bassirou Diomaye to come into power, and how, as you said, their influence played a role in him being elected. Thank you so much for that context. And yeah, thank you for that. I see, Dennis, you have a few points to say.
Yeah, thank you once again for inviting me to this podcast. I don't take it lightly or for granted. So for Senegalese people and the outcome of the elections with having a very young president inspires hope, not only to Africa, but to the entire world, that it is time young people believe more in themselves, that whichever dreams and aspirations we have can always come to a reality if we take our chances, and if we become more resilient and more hopeful, not losing hope despite the challenges that might come up. As we all know, the president was a prisoner up to, I think, about 2 weeks before the election. So despite the fact that he didn't have sufficient running ground, his resilience and his campaign team, which was well organized and oiled, ensured that they didn't quit, but they pushed on up to the victory line. So all over the world, young people are the drivers of revolution. If you see a country succeeding or failing, it's all in the hands of young people, because young people are the majority. In Africa, youths are 18 to 35. And in my country, Kenya, I believe in most of African countries, once you get to 18 years, you are able to vote. You are able to cast your vote, and at times not only cast your vote, but also to run for elective positions. So young people are the majority, and when casting the votes, most politicians craft their messaging surrounding the agenda of young people. And once most politicians know that once you get the young people block, then automatically you have at least 60% chances of winning. And there is an African proverb which says, old men declare war, but it is the young men who must fight and die. What does this mean to our context? That in as much as after all is said and done, it's all in the hands of the youth to structure. And most times our politics is marred by corruption and violence. And most of this corruption goes to bribing young people, because they know that most of young people are jobless, most of young people are desperate, and most young people also take advantage of elective times. That's the only time they can earn something, some little tokens from politicians and all that. So whether we young people are bribed to make a certain decision and they make a bad decision or they make a good decision, it's all in the hands of young people. And so I believe that young people play a vital role in influencing the outcome of elections in Africa. Elections by voting right, whether we vote right or not, whether by absconding to vote, voter apathy, it's still a decision. So the decision, the political future, it's all in the hands of young people in Africa and in the whole world. Thank you.
Right. I want to concur with Ida and Dennis in their findings regarding the role of youth in the Senegalese election and just politics in Africa in general. However, I just want to make a note regarding the rise of the current president to power. Like, I wouldn't want anyone to take away from the Senegalese incident or occurrence that it just was an overnight thing. Like, 2 weeks ago he's in prison, and then out of prison campaigns 2 weeks, and then there he is being sworn in. Like, it was a journey. Like, as Ida told us, his mentor Usman Sonko ran for president in 2019. He came in third place, and then he was barred from running again because of all these scandals that Ida was talking about, sexual assault and the like, and corruption and all that, which might have been government propaganda to keep out this person who was a major contender. And so Usman named his mentee, the current president Faye, as this is my protege. This is the next person who, let's back this person. So already from 2019, it seems that like the youth were already primed to back this person for the next election. So they must have mobilized, and of course, the current president Faye must have worked towards gaining support from the youth and shown that by the way, I'm actually for you, I'm one of you. He was he was working in the tax industry. So like he was just, I am like a regular Joe like you. I am understanding your woes. I don't like this corruption and all that. And so it was really a 5-year process to get him here, just so that nobody thinks that the youth, because the youth are always thought to be kind of swayed by emotion, swayed by money, swayed by, this was not some just random swaying of, okay, this is a young person, let's vote for him. This was a 5-year journey where his mentor, Usman Sonko, mentored him, like gave him a platform and really was able to get the youth to come behind him. So even when he was imprisoned, because obviously he was imprisoned because the government or the party in power was trying to keep him away from the ballot. So even that meant that he was a force to be reckoned with before the elections. So I just want to highlight that, yes, young people play a role in politics, but it's not necessarily emotionally generated like the person who gives us money or he's one of us. It's coming from a rational place. It's coming from a place of deduction, like, we want to vote for this young person because we believe that they have our interests at heart. They're going to do away with corruption, and it's our time to lead. So that's just the input I wanted to give as far as the role of young people in politics in Africa is concerned.
Yes, no, definitely. I fully agree with all your inputs. It's so interesting to see how how the elections unfolded with the context, with a lot of like background information, as to how Basuro came into power, and thank you for that contribution, and also just thank you for your contribution in adding to the fact that young people do play an active role in the outcomes, and as you said, JD, that young people encompass the majority in Africa, so essentially we do play that role of just influencing the elections. Thank you for your inputs, guys. Thank you for that. And yeah, so I just want to get into my next question on the implications now. So what are the positive or negative implications of Bassirou Diomaye being elected as president for the youth in Senegal, as well as young people in Africa? So what are those implications? I know that one of you were mentioning that there is that influence on not just Senegalese youth, but also youth in Africa. So I guess you can even talk about the negative implications. So what are the positive and negative implications of him being elected?
So I think that it's it's a significant event in Africa, and that's needs recognition. And what can I say is that I have read that the election of Bassirou Diomaye Faye has inspired similar movement as well, like in Cameroon, where people were having a similar party. I just forget the name of the party, to try to to seek the support of Cameroon citizens. So it can be an emulation in Africa so young people can say that, yeah, it's our time to lead. So that is a positive implication. But I think that, however, I think that there are challenges. There are still challenges. There are many challenges in Africa due to social cultural norm, where older generation is typically expected to lead while the younger generation flow. So to challenge these norm, I think that the Bassirou Diomaye Faye have to drive the necessary change that he has spoken during the campaign for the development, and it's called for first significant emulation across in Africa, to know that it's time now to give the young people the opportunities to lead, because I think that leading communities or leading should be done by young people, because they have the courage and they have force and they are healthy, but there is some bias. I don't know if you can say bias, in young people leading, because I think that he was talking about it. It has to do with emotional intelligence, how to how to be focused, and how not to be just excited by the new role that has been given to young people, but they have to show that what they were saying, they are able to do it for the development of Africa. That's my point.
I want to 100% concur with you, and I want to join my thoughts with what Eri highlighted earlier. So I picked two vital points. That one positive or two positive implications that the historic Senegalese elections have taught us, especially in our lifetime. I think for the 30 years that I've lived, I've not experienced Africans selecting a young person to be a president, except I think the year 2005 when Joseph Kabila was elected. I think he was appointed after his father, Laurent Kabila, was gunned down, but that was questionable. It was not a democratic process. But for this one now, one thing that young people have learned is, just as Eddie said, politics and gaining power is not an event that we are waiting for the next 5 years, then we'll contest and then we'll be able to get that power. It is a process which starts like we normally told, the end of an exam is the beginning of another. So the end of an election is the beginning of another election. So it's a process and it takes a lot of community organizing. But again, this election has really inspired the millennials and Gen Zs, because most millennials currently are psyching up themselves to take up these positions of influence, whether in the market industry, whether in the civic world or in the political world. So millennials are different from the baby boom generation, because they are a mixture of technology, they are a mixture of technology, they are a mixture of different types of revolutions and all that. And they've learned that there are different styles of organizing. So nowadays you don't have to do the old politics of using the always one manifesto that is always being recycled by all politicians. I will construct roads and infrastructure and etc. And it has shown that you don't have to be well-oiled, very wealthy for you to become elected, because as far as our elections are very expensive, as far as African elections are very expensive, and most young people are not able to finance those elections. But this election has just taught us that we just need to organize differently. We need to be intentional. We need to be more resilient. We need to put ourselves out there, because despite the fact that Osman Sonko was banned from this election, he never called it quits. He had to come up with a different approach and nominate someone to carry the mantle, and they had to push on. So it's time we learn from these people that it's possible. It's time for the millennials to know that when we were growing up, we were told we are the leaders of tomorrow. So tomorrow has already come, and tomorrow will not make itself available on our hands. We have to be more intentional and capture these spaces. So in short, I've learned we have to do different style of organizing. Politics and gaining power is not an event, it's a process, and the process starts now. Thank you.
I'd like to make a contribution to what was said regarding the positive and negative implications of the current Senegalese president. And two things, and one of them, Ida, I need your opinion. So the first thing is, I realize that we keep on saying that, President Faye is the youngest president in Africa. But there are those who might be scratching his head going like, but the guy is 44 years old. How young is young? Because I guess when people are thinking about a young person, they're thinking like somebody below 30. Because in Kenya, the age of a youth is 18 to 35 years old. So they're like, this guy is over 40. Like, how is he young? So I guess that might be like a question. But I guess in political terms, since we see most presidents in Africa getting to power when they were 50 or 60 or even 70, because in Kenya, we have people who are over 70 running for presidency, then I think maybe that's why we are saying that 44 is relatively young. And to be clear, he might not be the youngest leader in Africa, because we have the president of Burkina Faso, Captain Ibrahim Traore, who is currently 36, but he got there by military coup. So I guess that democratically elected, the president Faye is the youngest. So now here's where I was hoping that Ida could shed some light. Negative implications. So President Faye came in with the whole idea of, we're going to make things better, we're dealing with corruption, we're not going to do things the way the other regime did it. But I don't know if, they say that the more things change, the more they remain the same. Because I see that he recently elected a cabinet of 25 ministers, not elected, appointed. And there are only 4 women there. And so what does that say about young people are all about, let women have rights, let's have representation in government. You yourself, Ida, you're into females in spaces, whether it's political spaces or journalistic spaces. So I'm just wondering if that is a step back. And I understand that there was a ministry called the Ministry of Women, Family and Child Protection, but now it's remixed. It has been shortened to the Ministry of Family and Children Protection. So why is there the erasure of women in that ministry? Is this an indication that, yes, maybe youth were in power, but that doesn't mean that we're going to give more opportunities to the women who are youth? Women, it's like is this a sign that his administration might not necessarily favor women? Like there will not be much progress. Is that like a negative implication? Ida, what do you think?
Yeah, and I was right now discussing with one of my colleagues, and I was telling him that there are not enough women in the government for it's it's too small, because we used to see more women in the in Senegalese government, and like at least 30%, and now we see that it's around 30%. And now it's around 13%. And woman voice have been heard because they disagree with what's happened. But one of my colleagues was telling me that you are talking about women, but in the government we don't see young people. And I say, yeah, you are right, because Bassirou Diomaye Faye, 44, you mention it right now, 44 is not so young, because when we talk about young people, we are saying that we are talking about people who have at least 30, who have at least 18 until 35, and we don't see any young people in the government formed by Bassirou Diomaye Faye, and people were really talking about it. And yeah, for the question related to the, there is to the Ministry of Women, this ministry, according to me, is very important, because women were facing a lot of inegalities in Senegal, and these ministries was just trying to elaborate some political strategies or some public strategies to tackle inegalities in Senegal, like the the access to resources or the access to health or other opportunities that are not that are not the same according you are women or men. And yeah, just after the formation of the government, just after the government has the list of the government has been, released, many young people, many women raise their voice to say that they have to be careful because because this ministry was very important, and we cannot just accept to have less women in the decision field, and they have to correct it and they have to correct it in all the decisions that they will take for the futures. That's a basic. That's now the one of the strategies use it by women to to make the government take this question very seriously.
Yeah, thank you for that input. Actually, it makes a lot of sense when you see that there are some positive implications as a result of um him being elected, Basiro Dume Fe, but there's also those kind of negative implications of representation, right? And you find that, okay, the youth might be represented, but does this discount other representations, like, for instance, female representation in this instance? And I think it actually goes into our next question of, does representation matter? Will a young president cater to the needs of young people? And I think we kind of seen a hint of how maybe he will cater to those needs, but we also have this thing of, but which young people does he cater to? The needs of young people in poverty, of the middle class, of mainly males or women? So I think it then goes into representation. And how do you guys feel about that? Will a young president, if let's just say in our respective countries we follow the suit of Senegal and we elect young people by, I guess, political definition of a young person, would that actually cater to the needs of young people?
I want to believe that it's not all about getting power. We're always challenged in political organizing classes that what happens when power falls to the street? What do you do with that power? And this is informed by what ideologies as a person do you believe in? What ideologies define you as a leader? So if you're ideologically bankrupt, then even if you become the most powerful person in the world, then that power will corrupt you and you will end up following the footsteps of the previous leaders. One thing that I want to make clear is we are not against, and I believe this is also the opinion of the podcast of Ilizwi Moja. We are not against our fathers, those who are 60 years and above, the senior citizens leading Africa. But what we are trying to say is we've seen their leadership styles, we've seen what they're able to do for the continent, and we are calling for, let's see now what other young people or the slightly younger people can do when they have power. So it's not against us versus them. And what the new president is going to achieve or to cater for young people is going to be driven, and the difference will not be whether is young versus the old. No, what is he going to do different? And I believe what young people need at this moment in Africa is young people need empowerment. Young people need to be empowered by skills that can make them competitive in the whole world, especially now that we are in the era of artificial intelligence. The education system, the education should be made easy for young people to afford and to access the healthcare system, the living standards. You see, it should work on the economy of Senegal to ensure that young people are able to afford food, rent, and those who are married or those who are willing to even start families are able to afford it. They are able to be providers. And women empowerment, these are gains that Africa has struggled with. And we should not go back to where we were in terms of girl child and women empowerment. Women need to be empowered more. But most importantly, it's not the person who is in power. What roles are young people going to play to ensure that the current president is going to deliver according to his manifesto? So I believe if young people keep the president in check, young people in parliament, young people outside parliament, young people who are just normal civilians or senior or citizens, if they're able to keep the current government in check, then the president is going to perform. But if the end goal was just to have him elected and it ends there, and there is no one to keep it in check, then I believe he's not going to meet the expectations of not only young people, but the expectations of the whole country. Thank you.
So I think that Jomai president said that one of his priorities is of how he's gonna to empower them, how to tackle unemployment issues, because that is a big challenge all over in Africa, and how he could bring young people in the agricultures. All the that's basically what he said, that it is his main challenges. And yeah, and I think that young people, it's not because they have been part of the election of President Jomai, they have to be here to hold him accountable and satisfied all the premises that he has done. It's kind of role of sentinel that they have to assume. Young people have to assume to be a sentinel, to make sure that every decision, to make leaders accountable of whatever they have said before.
I'd also like to add that when a young president becomes the president of a nation, for example, like our Senegalese president, President Faye, he's not just the president of the young people. The young people might have put him there, but when he's sworn into office, he's president of the young people, the old people, the middle-aged, like the people with disabilities. He's the president of the entire nation. So I think also it might be a bit skewed if we are expecting him to solely focus on the needs of the young people, or like focus 90% of his attention there because they're the ones who got him there. Like, for sure, he should pay attention to them because they've been marginalized. And yes, it would be fantastic if he empowers them with skills on how to generate employment opportunities and whatnot, and learn the ropes in the politics. But we shouldn't forget that the youth are not the only people who are excluded. There are orphans, there are the people with the disabilities and other marginalized, I don't know, displaced people. Like there's a whole country that needs him as president. So I should think that regardless of his age, whether he's young or old, his focus should not be to, let me cater to the needs of the people who put me there. Let me cater to the needs of everyone, because whether they voted for him or not, he's their president. And as for the whole old people versus young people, that of course is, as JD said, that is definitely not what we are about. But there is this whole disgruntled feeling among the young people, because these seniors who are in office, who are currently in office, they entered politics 40 years ago when they were youth. Some of them have been in politics 40 years, 50 years, you'll hear, since the 70s, the 80s, some of them the 50s. So they were young, they have aged in the political system. So the thing is, why aren't they mentoring other people, or even just giving way? Like, I think it's highly commendable what Mr. Usman Sonko did when he found that, all right, I've tried my luck, it looks like I'm bad, let me raise this young person, let me mentor him. And I believe even before this whole political fiasco in 2019, you had been mentoring him before. Both of them were working in the tax industry. So it was
Yeah.
like a lifetime, like this lifetime of mentorship. So now let me mentor you in this space because I'm seeing that you have capabilities, we have the same ideology. And so you take the mantle. And I would hope that in the next 10 years, I don't know the election cycle or how long, I believe most presidencies, it's 2 terms. I would hope after the 10 years that president, if he gets another term, but if he's there for 10 years, I would hope he himself would have mentored another young person, whether they win or not, but that's the whole thing, passing the baton. So I think the young people asked is, why are you not passing the baton? Our neighbor here in East Africa has been in president the entire time I have been alive, since 1986. Why is he not passing the baton? And he's not the only president. Like in Africa, that is the whole thing. It's leaders. So we of course we need the senior citizen. We need the seasoned politicians because they can show us the rope. But when they refuse to give way to young people to also take up these spaces that they took up themselves when they were young, when they refuse to pass on the baton, to pass on their wisdom to the next generation, then I think that's where we're in a situation where, okay, move aside, it's our turn. But the reality is we need them. So I hope the senior citizens can move towards a more mentor role. Let us mentor you. We take this is the positive you can take, and don't take the negative from us. Take the positive. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, thank you so much for your input, guys. I'm gathering that there is an aspect where representation does matter to an extent, but it's also catering. Really, it's regardless of whether you're a young or older president or whatever it might be, it's understanding the needs of every group of individuals in a country, understanding their needs, whether it's the young, the older, disabled, and so forth, and catering to those needs. And I don't think we've really been able to succeed. Oftentimes presidents have, a lot of the presidents, they have their own political agenda and personal agendas as well, which often takes away certain needs of individuals. And with these personal agendas and political agendas, you find that because they are, let's just say, a prime example, an essay, a freedom fighter, for instance, he would then cater to the needs of other individuals who were fighting with him during the time of liberation and the movements and so forth. He would then have all these individuals that he caters for, but not to the actual general public and their particular needs. So I'm grateful for the conversation that we're having now of representation. And yeah, thank you guys. I have just a bonus question and then we will end off our podcast. So how can we inspire young people to vote in their country's upcoming elections? There are some elections that are coming up. South Africa has elections, Algeria, Chad, and etc. Some young people are not motivated to vote, others are. But for those who are not motivated, how do we inspire them? How do we get them there? Yeah.
For us, we first of all thank you for this enlightening conversation. I think we are all drivers of change wherever we are, and personally, as a community organizer, why am I organizing? We are organizing so that we can take power, because most of these reforms or most of these changes we are calling upon, we've realized that we can't create enough change. We can't bring enough change if we are not on the table. So for young people, I'll say that the more we continue voting, taking apathy, not voting, not wanting to get engaged in politics, the more situation becomes worse for us, because people who have outdated knowledge, people who don't care about the future of Africa, who are the young people, they're the ones who keep on making for us decisions. So the more we abscond, the more young people not only to come out to vote, but they also don't want to contest for these positions, the more we get gloomed and we are not moving forward, even in our own personal ambitions. So to young people, I'll tell you that if you don't come out to contest, if you don't come out to vote, you're not only letting down your country, but it's a letdown to God, to your family, to yourself, because failure to contest or failure to vote is giving the other person you don't want an opportunity to continue being in power. And I'll tell the young people that it's not only coming out to vote, but also voting out wisely. Thank you.
Okay, so I think with youth voter apathy, I don't know if it's contextual, but like just looking at it from a South African perspective, obviously it's a very systemic issue in that civic education isn't being like given to the youth. And while we do learn about civic education in high school, I don't think we're taught how to apply the power that we have within our democracies to or like apply that power to change the country as it is. I think I won't say that other African countries have this because maybe other African countries don't have the same attitude as South Africans, but I do think that with young South African people, there is this voter apathy that comes out of, oh, nothing's going to change. Everyone's going to vote for, the corrupt parties anyway. So why should I even register to vote? And I think that defeatist mindset comes from somewhere, and looking at where it comes from is very important, because I think we're always treating the symptom of the issues, like telling young people to vote, but then like, why aren't they voting? And I remember when we were young, because I'm gonna be voting for the first time this year. And I remember when we were younger, we'd always be like, oh, I can't wait to vote. I can't wait to vote. But even with me voting this year, it took a lot for me to educate myself about South Africa's like representative democracy, to understand, democratic and political jargon. And obviously I have the privilege and the resources to go and ask political scientists that are, lecturers or professors in big South African universities. But how do we navigate that conversation when, even just looking at the jargon and the words and the vocabulary might be off-putting for a continent where a lot of people don't speak English? And for the South African context, English is the sixth most spoken first language. So even when we're looking at the information about voting, it needs to be more accessible in less like Eurocentric ways, in less bureaucratic ways, in less ways that reinforce systemic barriers. So like if I need the education to be educated about the power of democracy and the power of my vote, and education is only accessible to a certain echelon of society, then obviously only that echelon of society, or mostly that echelon of society, will have the enthusiasm to vote. And so even voter suppression in that way is very structural and systemic. And so like vouching for egalitarianism, even outside of voting, even outside of suffrage and enfranchisement, is very, very important. So yeah.
Yeah, I share what you say. I think that we need to inform young people about the importance of voting and how it can impact their life. For this election, my young sisters tell me that 24 was telling me that I'm not going to vote. And I said him, don't come later complaining me about unemployment or something like that, because it's the time for you to have the opportunities to change things and you have to take it. So after that, she decided to go and vote. And I think that's very important to sensibilize young people about the importance of voting, about the importance of democracy. And and it's a really matter for them.
Yeah, no, that's so important. I love how you guys each understand and believe that voting is very important, and how being informed about voting, being educated about, your rights to vote, because a lot of us don't really know our rights, right? So I think that is extremely important. And thank you so much for just your individual inputs in the discussion. So it has been a very great discussion. It was nail-biting discussion. So I was very intrigued by everything, your inputs that you all have to say. And we hope that the audience enjoyed this discussion. And to the audience, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel, as well as click the notification bell so that you can stay on top of our new episodes once we release them. So be on the lookout for our next podcast episode as we continue our discussion with trailblazing young leaders. Bye for now.